Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. What if everything you were taught about money was designed to keep you in the rat race? This is the question that changed my life when I was 9 years old, and it is the same question that I invite you to explore with me today on this journey to financial freedom. Why do some people work all their lives and never achieve economic security, while others, with less formal education, build fortunes? Have you ever wondered why the education system doesn't teach us anything about money, even though we'll spend the rest of our lives working for it? What secrets do the rich know that the rest of us don't? In this audiobook, you will discover the lessons that Robert Kiyosaki learned from his two parents, one highly educated but poor, and the other without a college education but immensely wealthy. You'll understand why your home isn't an asset. You'll learn the fundamental difference between working for money and making money work for you. And more importantly, you'll develop a whole new mindset about wealth that will allow you to see opportunities where others only see obstacles. Before we begin, I want to ask you something special. If you're ready to change your financial future, write in the comments, "Today, I choose to educate myself financially and create my own freedom." This simple act of public engagement will mark the beginning of your transformation. Remember, you were not born to live paying bills and die. You were born to create, to contribute, and to live abundantly. We all have a financial genius inside waiting to be awakened. Today, together, we will begin to awaken yours. Chapter 1. The Story of Two Fathers, a conversation that changed everything. Imagine for a moment that you are a 9-year-old boy in Hawaii, and your life is about to take a course that will define not only your future, but that of millions of people around the world. This is the story of Robert Kiyosaki, a boy who had the unique privilege of learning about money from two radically opposite perspectives through two father figures who would mark his destiny. The first father was his biological father, a brilliant, highly educated man with a doctorate obtained in less than 2 years. He was respected in the educational community, held high positions in the Hawaiian school system, and was considered by all to be a model of academic success. However, despite his intelligence and multiple titles, this man constantly struggled with money. He lived paycheck to paycheck, always worried about the bills, always waiting for the next raise that would finally solve his problems. But that increase was never enough. The second father was Mike's father, Robert's best friend. This man hadn't even finished 8th grade, but he possessed something that no college degree could award: financial intelligence. While the educated father read academic books and attended lectures on pedagogy, Mike's father studied financial statements, analyzed investments, and built a business empire that would eventually make him one of the richest men in Hawaii. The paradox was obvious, even for a child. How was it possible that the smartest man I knew, the one who had all the titles and accolades, lived with constant financial worries, while the man with no formal education swam in abundance? This fundamental question became Robert's obsession and the driving force for his financial education. What was fascinating about this situation was to observe how both parents approached the same problems from completely different angles. When money was discussed at the table, the poor dad would say things like, "I can't afford it. Money doesn't grow on trees. The rich are greedy. You have to study hard to get a good job." These seemingly innocent phrases revealed a deep-seated scarcity mentality. On the other hand, Rich Dad never allowed those words to come out of his mouth. Instead of saying, "I can't afford it," he asked, "How can I afford it?" This simple difference in language represented a universe of difference in thought. A sentence closed the mind and justified impotence. The other opened up possibilities and activated creativity. The poor dad fervently believed in the traditional system: study hard, get good grades, get a secure job with good benefits, save money, buy a house, and someday when you retire, you will finally be able to enjoy life. It was the classic recipe for success in the industrial age, a formula that had worked for the previous generation, but which already showed obvious cracks. Rich Dad had a completely different view. For him, job security was a dangerous illusion.
He watched as people traded their time and freedom for the false promise of security, only to discover decades later that they had built a golden prison from which they could not escape. True security, he said, comes from your ability to make money, not from depending on someone else to give it to you. This philosophical difference manifested in every aspect of their lives. The poor dad saved pennies, cut coupons, and postponed his desires for a future that never came. He lived with the mentality that money was scarce and had to be jealously protected. Rich Dad, on the other hand, understood that money was plentiful for those who knew how to create it. It was not a question of saving but of investing, not of protecting but of multiplying. When the poor dad spoke of his house, he called it his greatest investment, his most important asset. He took pride in every mortgage payment, seeing each installment as a step towards financial freedom. Rich Dad shook his head at this idea. Your house is a liability, he said bluntly. It takes money out of your pocket every month. An asset puts money in your pocket. If you don't understand this fundamental difference, you'll never be rich. This revelation was like an earthquake in young Robert's mind. Everything he had heard at home, everything that society preached, was suddenly called into question. How was it possible that the house, the ultimate symbol of the American dream, was actually a liability? But when he analyzed the numbers coldly, the truth was undeniable. The house required monthly mortgage payments, taxes, maintenance, insurance. Everything came out of the pocket. Nothing went in. The contrast between the two parents was most evident in their conversations about work. The poor dad spoke of work as a duty, a noble obligation, something that good citizens did to contribute to society. He valued loyalty to the company, years of service, the corporate ladder. His heroes were the dedicated employees who received gold watches after 25 years of service. Rich Dad saw work completely differently. For him, working for others was just the first step, a way to learn and accumulate capital to eventually work for oneself. If you work for money, he explained, you give power to your employer. If money works for you, you hold and control the power. It was not a matter of being disloyal or irresponsible, but of understanding that in the game of money, whoever controls the source controls the game. Dinners at Rich Dad's house were real lessons in practical economics. While eating, they discussed business, analyzed investment opportunities, studied market trends. Money was not a taboo subject, but the center of educational and stimulating conversations. The children learned about assets and liabilities as they passed the salt, about cash flow as they served dessert. In contrast, in the poor dad's house, talking about money over dinner was considered tacky, almost vulgar. Money was that awkward topic that adults talked about in whispers when they thought kids weren't listening. This culture of silence around money perpetuated financial ignorance from generation to generation. The poor dad believed deeply in formal education as the key to success. Every degree, every certificate, every academic recognition was celebrated as a step towards a better life. The more you study, he repeated like a mantra, the better job you will get. His faith in the education system was absolute and unquestioned. Rich Dad didn't despise education, but he saw it more pragmatically. The problem with school, he explained, is that it prepares you to be an employee, not an employer. It teaches you to look for work, not to create work. It trains you to follow orders, not to think financially. For him, true education happened outside the classroom, in the real world of business and investment.
This educational dichotomy created a constant tension in young Robert's mind. On the one hand, he wanted to please his biological father, get good grades, follow the traditional path. On the other hand, Rich Dad's lessons resonated with an undeniable truth that he could see manifested in reality. His educated father, with all his degrees, lived with constant financial stress, while the father, uneducated, lived in abundance and freedom. The difference in their philosophies on government and taxation was equally telling. The poor father saw the government as a benevolent protector, a necessary institution that provided essential services and cared for the less fortunate. He paid his taxes with civic pride, seeing them as his contribution to the common good. Rich Dad had a more cynical, or perhaps more realistic view. He understood that tax laws were written by the rich and for the rich.
While the poor dad religiously paid his taxes on his paycheck before he saw a dime, the rich dad structured his businesses through corporations that allowed him to spend first and pay taxes on what was left. It wasn't about illegally evading taxes, but about understanding and using the same legal tools that the rich had used for centuries. The attitude towards risk made another fundamental difference. The poor father had a paralyzing fear of risk. His mantra was to play it safe. He preferred the certainty of a mediocre salary to the uncertainty of a great opportunity. This fear of risk kept him trapped in a life of financial mediocrity, always dreaming but never acting. Rich Dad understood that risk was integral to success, but it wasn't about being reckless. Risk exists for those who don't know what they're doing, he said. Financial education reduces risk. Knowledge is the best protection against risk. For him, the biggest risk was not taking any risks at all, staying in the comfort zone while the world changed around him. Weekends at Rich Dad's house were unique educational experiences. While other children played video games or watched television, Robert and Mike accompanied Rich Dad to see properties, review his businesses, meet with his accountants and lawyers. It was not child labor, it was practical education of the highest level. They were learning by osmosis what no school would ever teach. The rich dad had a particular way of teaching that challenged all traditional pedagogical methods. He did not give sermons or lectures. Instead, he asked questions, created learning situations, let the children discover the lessons for themselves. Experience is the best teacher, he said, but only if you reflect on it. Otherwise, it's just something that happened to you. One day, the poor father came home excited. He had received a raise, the largest of his career. At last, he thought, he could breathe easy, pay off all the debts, maybe even save something. But Robert noticed something disturbing. Within weeks of the raise, his father was just as financially stressed as before, maybe more. The extra money had disappeared in new expenses, a better house, a newer car. The rat race had accelerated, but it was still the same endless race. When Robert shared this observation with Rich Dad, he smiled sadly. "That's what I call the employee curse," he explained. Every pay raise comes with an increase in expenses. People adjust their lifestyle to their income, not their income to their financial goals. That's why they never move forward. They just run faster on the same wheel. The rich dad had a golden rule that he constantly repeated. The rich acquire assets. The poor and the middle class acquire liabilities, thinking that they are active. This simple distinction was the key to all his financial success. While others bought bigger houses, more luxurious cars, and went deeper into debt, he bought income-generating properties, cash flow-producing businesses, investments that grew over time. The way each parent handled financial crises was telling. When the poor father faced money problems, his solution was always the same: working longer hours, looking for a second job, taking out a loan. It was like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. The rich dad, in a crisis, would stop and think. Financial problems, he said, are symptoms of thinking problems. They're not solved with more money, but with more intelligence. The concept of time was another area where their philosophies diverged dramatically. The poor father sold his time for money, and since time was limited, his ability to generate income was also limited. He worked 40, 50, 60 hours a week, but there was a physical and mental limit to how much he could work. The rich dad, on the other hand, bought the time of others through employees and systems. His ability to generate income was not limited by his personal hours, but multiplied by the hours of everyone who worked for him. A turning point came when the poor father lost his job. After years of loyal service, sacrificing time with his family, postponing his dreams, he was laid off for corporate restructuring. Suddenly, all that security he had worked so hard for evaporated in an instant. The man who had dedicated his life to a system found himself betrayed by that same system. Rich Dad wasn't surprised. "That's what happens when you put all your eggs in someone else's basket," he commented cruelly but frankly. Corporate loyalty is a myth of the last century. Companies are loyal to their shareholders, not their employees. If you don't understand this, you'll always be vulnerable. The poor father's labor crisis revealed another uncomfortable truth. His specialization, which had been his pride, was now his prison. He had spent decades honing in a very specific field, and now those skills had limited value outside the education system. It was like a fish out of water, highly adapted to an environment that no longer existed. Rich Dad, on the other hand, had cultivated transferable skills: leadership, negotiation, financial analysis, systems building. Specialize in your business, he advised, but generalize in your skills. A specialist is vulnerable. A generalist with specialized knowledge is invincible. The way each parent viewed retirement was perhaps the most tragic difference. The poor father lived for the day of his retirement, this mythical moment in the future when he would finally be free. He counted the years, the months, the days. His entire present life was a sacrifice on the altar of an uncertain future. Rich Dad didn't believe in traditional retirement. "Why would I want to stop doing what I love?" he commented. "If your work is your passion and your passion generates wealth, retirement is irrelevant. Only those who hate what they do dream of the day when they can stop doing it." This philosophy extended to how each parent viewed social contribution. The poor father believed that he contributed to society through his work as an educator, molding young minds by being a public servant, and he was right, his contribution was valuable. But the rich dad pointed out that he had created hundreds of jobs, revitalized neighborhoods with his real estate investments, generated millions in taxes that funded public services. The rich, he said, contribute by creating opportunities, not just by occupying one. The relationship to failure was another crucial point of divergence. The poor father feared failure as much as death itself. One mistake, one bad decision could destroy the reputation he had carefully built over decades. This fear paralyzed him, kept him in the known and safe. Rich Dad embraced failure as an invaluable teacher. "You only fail if you give up," he taught. "Everything else is learning." He openly shared his failures, his bankruptcies, his bad investments, not with shame, but with pride in the lessons learned. One day, Robert witnessed a conversation that crystallized all the difference between the two parents. A mutual acquaintance had come to ask both of them for financial advice. He had some money saved up and didn't know what to do with it. The poor father recommended putting it in the bank, maybe on a certificate of deposit, something safe. "You can't lose," he said with satisfaction. The rich dad shook his head. "You can't lose, but you can't win either. Inflation will eat that money slowly. It's like keeping ice cubes in the desert. They look solid, but they're melting." He suggested instead to educate that money, to put it to work, even if that meant risk and possible initial losses. The way each parent related to the rich revealed a lot about their psychology. The poor father had a subtle but persistent resentment toward the rich. He saw them as exploitative, fortunate, or corrupt. "No one gets rich honestly," he sometimes muttered, as if wealth were inherently immoral. The rich dad studied the rich, learned from them, sought their company.
Did not idealize or demonize them. He simply saw them as people who had cracked a code that he also wanted to understand. "If you want to be rich," he said, "study the rich. If you want to be poor, study the poor. They are all excellent teachers in their field." The theme of charity and generosity showed another interesting paradox. The poor father, despite his financial limitations, was generous with his time and knowledge. She helped students after school, participated in community committees, gave what she could, but her ability to give was severely limited by her financial situation. The rich dad was equally generous, but on a completely different scale. He donated entire buildings to charities, funded college scholarships, and created foundations. "Money is like water," he philosophized. "If you accumulate it without letting it flow, it stagnates and rots. But if you let it flow, it purifies and multiplies." His generosity wasn't just altruism, it was part of his philosophy of abundance. The education of children was another ideological battleground. The poor father insisted that Robert concentrate exclusively on his academic studies. Grades were everything. One more B was a disappointment, one less A was barely acceptable. The future depended on those letters on paper.
The rich dad had a different perspective. Grades measure your ability to memorize and repeat, not your ability to think and create, he said. He did not despise formal education, but insisted that true education happened in the real world. A students work for C students, and B students work for the government, he joked. But there was truth in his humor. Robert found himself constantly navigating between these two worlds, these two truths. At school, he pretended to believe in the system to please his father and teachers, but in his mind, the rich dad's seeds had been planted and were germinating. He could see his teachers with their advanced degrees and modest salaries, and couldn't help but wonder, if they're so smart, why aren't they rich? The attention peaked when Robert had to choose his college major. The poor father wanted me to study to be a teacher or doctor or lawyer, respectable and safe professions. Rich Dad suggested that he study business, accounting, or better yet, start a business and learn by doing. The decision Robert made was Solomonic. He went to college to please his poor dad, but he studied what Rich Dad recommended. And more importantly, while in college, he began investing in building his real financial literacy. Over the years, each parent's self-fulfilling prophecy materialized. The poor father, despite all his education and hard work, ended his days with financial difficulties, dependent on Social Security and the charity of others. He died leaving bills to pay. The rich dad, the man with no formal education, built a business empire. He left a financial legacy for generations, and more importantly, he left a legacy of knowledge that has transformed millions of lives through the teachings he passed on to Robert. The most profound lesson Robert learned from having two parents wasn't simply about money. It was about the power of perspective, the importance of questioning, and the danger of blindly accepting conventional wisdom. He learned that there are multiple ways of seeing the world, and that the dominant way is not necessarily the right one. This unique experience of having two parents taught Robert something invaluable: the ability to see both sides of a coin, to understand different paradigms, and to consciously choose what to believe and what to reject. It was not a matter of demonizing one parent and glorifying the other, but of understanding that each operated from his or her best understanding, but that some understandings lead to better results than others. Chapter 2. The first lesson: the rich don't work for money. It was Saturday morning, and 9-year-old Robert was sitting with his best friend Mike on the back porch of their house, staring at empty cans of toothpaste. They were not just any cans, they were the main material of their first business, a business that had been born out of humiliation and exclusion, and that was about to end in a lesson that would change their lives forever. It had all started weeks ago when Jimmy, the rich kid at school, had thrown a party at his beach house. Everyone was invited. Everyone except Robert and Mike. The reason was not explicitly stated, but both children understood it perfectly. They were the poor children of the school. Not poor in the sense of having no food or shelter, but poor compared to the wealthy families whose children attended that private school. The pain of exclusion burned like acid in Robert's stomach. That night he came home with red eyes from holding back tears and asked his father why they weren't rich. His father, the educated man with multiple titles, put down his newspaper and looked at his son with a mixture of sadness and frustration. "We are not rich because I chose to be a teacher," he finally said. "Teachers don't think about being rich. We care more about educating than making money." But then he added something that planted a seed in Robert's mind. If you want to be rich, you have to learn how to make money. And when Robert asked how, his father, with all his politeness, didn't know what to answer. Use your head. That was all he could say that night. Robert couldn't sleep. Use your head. It echoed in his mind like an unanswered riddle. The next morning, he ran to Mike's house with a proposal. They were going to get rich together. Mike, who shared the pain of exclusion, immediately agreed. This is how their first business company was born. For weeks, the two boys tried to unravel the money-making mystery. Then, in a moment of what they believed to be pure brilliance, they remembered that the government made coins because they couldn't make their own. They began collecting empty tubes of toothpaste that at the time came in lead tubes. They would melt the lead and pour it into plaster molds to make. The day of the great foundry had arrived. On the back porch, with a makeshift fire and carefully prepared plaster casts, they were about to begin their operation when Robert's father showed up. His expression went from curiosity to alarm to laughter in a matter of seconds. "What are they doing?" he asked, although the answer was obvious. "What you said," Robert replied proudly. "We're making money." The father's friend couldn't contain his laughter. "They're literally making money," he said with a laugh. "This is the closest thing to the real thing I've ever seen." Robert's father became serious. "Children, this is illegal. It's called counterfeiting. If you continue, you will go to jail." The world of the two small businessmen collapsed. All that work, all that planning, for nothing. But Robert's father, seeing the devastation on their faces, softened. "Guys, don't be discouraged," he said. "The important thing is that you did something. Most people just talk and dream of getting rich. You acted. I'm proud of you." That's when Mike casually mentioned that his father knew how to make money. Robert was surprised. He knew Mike's father only by sight. He knew he was a businessman, but he had no idea of the magnitude of his wealth. "Would he be willing to teach us?" Robert asked hopefully. Mike shrugged. "We'd have to ask him, but I warn you, he's not like the teachers at school. He's different." That afternoon, the two boys met at Mike's father's imposing house. Robert had never been there before, and the understated but obvious opulence intimidated him. Furniture that seemed to be worth more than anything else in his house, art on the walls that he didn't understand but knew was valuable, and an air of power that seemed to emanate from every corner. They waited in the study for what seemed like an eternity. Half an hour, 45 minutes. Robert began to get impatient, then angry. "This is disrespectful," he muttered. "My dad would never make anyone wait." Finally, as Robert was about to leave in a rage, the door opened and Mike's father entered. He was a large Hawaiian man with hands that seemed capable of building or destroying with equal ease. He didn't apologize for the wait. He just sat behind his desk and looked at them with eyes that seemed to read their souls. "I understand that you want to learn how to make money," he said, without preamble. "Is that correct?" The children nodded nervously. "Well, I have an offer for you. I will teach them, but I won't do it classroom style. You will work for me, and I'll teach you. If you don't work, I don't teach you. I can teach you faster if you work, and you'll waste your time if you just want to sit back and listen how they do at school. It's my offer. Take it or leave it."
"Can I ask something first?" Robert ventured. "No, take it or leave it. I have too much work to do to waste my time. If they can't make a strong decision, they'll never learn how to make money. Still, opportunities come and go. Being able to know when to make quick decisions is an important skill." Robert looked at Mike, who nodded slightly. "We took it," they said in unison. "Well, Mrs. Martin will be waiting for you tomorrow at 9 a.m. in my shop. They will work 3 hours, and I will pay them 10 cents an hour. They will work on Saturdays." "But I have a baseball game on Saturday," Robert protested. Mike's father stood up from his chair, his considerable height making him even more intimidating. "Take it or leave it," he repeated coldly. "I'll take it," Robert whispered. "See you on Saturday," Mike's father said, and left the studio. The first Saturday was torture. The shop was small, dusty, and the work was monotonous to the point of pain. Mrs. Martin, a kind but strict woman, had them dust the cans on the shelves. Each can had to be cleaned individually, then back to its exact place. It was the kind of work that kills the soul slowly. 3 hours for 30 cents. Robert could buy just one comic book with his weekly salary, and the comics cost 10 cents each. The sacrifice of his baseball game hurt even more when he thought of the pittance he had earned. Week after week, the pattern continued. Dust, cans, shelves, 10 cents an hour. Mike seemed to take it easy, but Robert was boiling inside. This was not learning to make money. This was child exploitation. His poor father was right. Mike's father was an exploiter, a rich man who preyed on desperate children. After 4 weeks, Robert exploded. "This is a scam," he told Mike over lunch. "Your dad lied to us. It's not teaching us anything. It's just using us as cheap labor." Mike, always calmer, tried to calm him down. "My dad says to meet him this Saturday. He says it's time to talk." "Talking is not enough," Robert snapped. "Either he really teaches us or I leave."
That Saturday, Robert walked into Mike's father's office like a raging bull. He didn't wait to be invited to sit down. He didn't exchange courtesies. He just exploded. "You are a cheater," he shouted. "You promised to teach us and you was taught us nothing. I've worked for a measly 10 cents an hour. I've sacrificed my baseball games and everything for nothing. You are an exploiter, just like all the rich. He takes advantage of the poor." Mike's father let him vent. He was unfazed by the accusations. He simply waited until Robert, emotionally exhausted, collapsed into a chair. "Are you done?" he asked calmly. Robert nodded, suddenly in shame at his outburst. "Okay, now you're ready to learn. You have passed the first test." "What proof?" asked Robert, confused. "The test of life. You see, Robert, what you just experienced is what most people live their entire lives. They work for little pay, get angry at their boss, think they're exploited, but never do anything about it except complain. Some quit and look for another job, hoping for more money, thinking that more money will solve the problem, but it never does." Robert heard her anger turning into curiosity. "So what's the solution?" "First, stop blaming me and stop thinking I'm the problem. If you think I'm the problem, you have to change me. If you realize that you're the problem, you can change yourself, learn something, and grow wiser. Most people want everyone in the world to change, except themselves. So what should I do?" "Wear this," Rich Dad said, touching his head. "If you use it well, you'll soon thank me for giving you a chance and become a rich man." Robert was confused. "But won't you teach us how to make money?" "No, not in the way you expect. Life is the best teacher. Life doesn't talk to you, it pushes you. Every push is life saying, 'Wake up, there's something I want you to learn.' If you learn the lesson, you move on. If not, life continues to push you." People do two things. Some let life push them, others get angry and push back, but they push against their boss or their job or their husband or wife. They don't know that it's life that's pushing them. "And what does this have to do with working for 10 cents an hour?" Robert asked. "Congratulations," Rich Dad said with a smile. "You're angry. Think about it. If you weren't angry and just accepted the 10 cents gladly, I'd be telling you that there's no hope for you. But you're struggling. That's good. Now let me ask you something. What will solve your problem?" "Well, if you paid me more, I wouldn't be so angry." "How much more?" "At least 25 cents an hour. Or rather," Rich Dad took out his wallet, "how about $1 an hour?" Robert's eyes widened. $1 an hour in 1956 for a 9-year-old was a fortune. How about $10 an hour? Robert couldn't speak. $10 an hour? His mind was spinning. $10 an hour? He would be the richest kid in school. He could buy anything he wanted. Rich Dad put away his wallet. "Well, nothing. You'll continue to work for 10 cents an hour." Robert was stunned. "What? You've just experienced what most employees feel when they receive a job offer. Your desire took over, and now the emotion takes over thought. That's what happens to most people. Their lives are controlled by two emotions, fear and greed. The fear of not having money makes them work hard, and once they get the check, greed or desire, it makes them think of all the wonderful things money can buy. Then they need more money, and the pattern repeats. Fear, work, money, greed, fear, work, money. They're running in what I call the rat race. And how do I avoid that? Use emotions to think. Don't think with emotions. When you controlled your emotions first by agreeing to work for 10 cents, then by resisting your emotions when I offered you more money, you were learning to control your emotions and think. That is the first step. Robert felt as if he had aged years in minutes. So will I still be working for 10 cents? No, in fact, you'll work for free. Free? Robert couldn't believe his ears. Yes, I will eliminate the temptation completely. You'll work the same 3 hours every Saturday, but I will pay you nothing. If you can overcome the desire to work for money, I'll teach you how to make money work for you. Robert looked at Mike, who had been silent throughout the conversation. Mike nodded slightly, indicating that he would follow his father's plan. "It's okay," Robert said finally. "I will." The next 3 weeks were a different kind of torture. Working without pay went against everything Robert had learned about work and money. His poor father was horrified when he found out. They're being exploited. It's basic right. Work deserves compensation. But Robert persevered, and then, in the 4th week of unpaid work, something extraordinary happened. As he dusted off the cans as usual, he noticed something he had never seen before. Mrs. Martin was cutting the covers of the old comics in half and discarding the rest. "What do you do with those comics?" Robert asked. Mrs. Martin replied, "The distributor comes in an hour, and she only wants the covers for credit. You can take the comics with you if you want." A light went on in Robert's mind. He ran to get Mike. "I have an idea." That afternoon, after work, the two boys picked up all the discarded comics, hundreds of them, took them to Mike's basement, and began organizing them. A week later, they opened their comic book library. The business was simple but brilliant. They charged 10 cents per child for 2 hours of unlimited reading. The comics cost 10 cents each in the store, but in his library, the kids could read 5 or 6 in 2 hours. It was a bargain that no kid in the neighborhood could resist. Mike's younger sister was hired as the librarian, paying her 1 day a week to oversee the after-school operation. The business worked on its own.
Robert and Mike didn't even need to be present. At their peak, they earned $9.50 per week, a fortune for 2 9-year-old children. Rich Dad was beaming when he heard about it. "See what happens when they use this?" he said, touching his head. "You stopped working for money and started making money work for you. Their library makes money even when they're not there. That's what the rich do." But the deeper lesson was yet to come. One day, Rich Dad took them for a walk around the neighborhood. They stopped in front of a house for sale. "How much do you think this house is worth?" he asked. The children shrugged. $50,000? ventured Mike. "Close. It's selling for 45, but that is not the important thing. The important thing is to understand what is actually an asset and what is a liability. This house, for most people who buy it, will be a liability." "But isn't one's house your greatest investment?" asked Robert, repeating what he had heard from his poor father. "That's the mentality that keeps people poor. A house you live in takes money out of your pocket every month. Mortgage, taxes, maintenance, services. An asset puts money in your pocket. If that home were a rental property that makes more money than it costs to maintain, it would be an asset. Do you see the difference?" It was such a simple distinction, yet so revolutionary. Robert felt as if he had been given new glasses to see the financial world. "The rich acquire assets," the Rich Dad continues. "The poor and the middle class acquire liabilities thinking that they are active. That is the fundamental difference. If they understand that, they understand everything they need to know about money." Over the next few months, Rich Dad continued to teach the children through experiences and conversations. He showed them his financial statements, explaining how money flowed through his multiple businesses. He taught them about corporations, about taxes, about the power of money. "Fear and ignorance cause poverty," he told them. "Not the government, not the economy, not your boss, you. If you want to change your situation, you must first change your thinking." One day, while reviewing the store's finances, Rich Dad made an observation that would stay with Robert forever. "Look at Mrs. Martin. She works hard, she's honest, she's reliable, but she's afraid. Fear of losing your job, fear of not having enough for retirement, fear of not being able to pay her bills. That fear controls her. She will never ask for a significant raise. She will never start her own business. She will never take risks. And that is why she will always be poor, no matter how hard she works." "But isn't it cruel to say that?" Robert asked. "Is it crueler to tell the truth or let someone live a lie?" Cruelty is the system that taught her to work for money instead of making money work for her. Cruelty is the school that never taught him about money. Cruelty is a society that keeps her running in the rat race until she's too old to run. The comic book library business eventually came to an end when some neighborhood thugs broke in and destroyed it. But by then, Robert and Mike had learned the most important lesson of all. They didn't need a job to make money. They could create money out of thin air using only their intelligence and creativity. "Remember," Rich Dad told them the day the library closed, "you didn't work for that money. They created a system that made money. That's the difference between being an employee and being an entrepreneur. An employee trades time for money. An entrepreneur creates systems that generate money." Chapter 3. The second lesson, the importance of financial education. Robert was 16 years old when Rich Dad took him to one of his apartment buildings. It was a modest building, not at all luxurious, but well maintained. As they walked through the halls, Rich Dad pointed out details that most people would never notice: the quality of the paint, the condition of the carpets, the efficiency of the heating system. "This building," Rich Dad said, "brings me $3,000 a month after all expenses. Do you know what that means?" Robert did quick calculations. He earns $36,000 a year from this building. That's just the beginning. The important thing is that this money comes in every month, whether you work or not, whether you're sick or healthy, whether you're on vacation or at home. That's what I call passive income. But to really understand how it works, you need to understand something that school will never teach you: financial literacy. That afternoon, in his office, Rich Dad pulled out a piece of paper and drew two simple diagrams. "This," he said, "is all you need to understand about money." However, most people go their entire lives without understanding these basics. He drew two columns. One said assets and the other passives. An asset, he explained, is something that puts money in your pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. It's that simple. However, most people spend their lives acquiring liabilities thinking that they are active. Robert looked at the diagrams, feeling that something fundamental was being revealed, something so obvious that it was almost invisible. "Give me examples," Robert asked. "Your father thinks his house is his greatest asset, right?" Robert nodded. His father always spoke proudly of his house, how its value had increased, what his retirement security was. But every month, what happens to that house? Mortgage, money goes out; taxes, money goes out; maintenance, money goes out; services, money goes out. "There's some money coming in, isn't it?" admitted Robert. "So it's a liability, not an asset. It doesn't matter what the bankers or real estate agents say. If it takes money out of your pocket, it is a liability." Rich Dad continued to draw, this time creating what he called simplified financial statements. It showed how money flows through the financial statements of a poor, a middle class, and a rich person. "Look," he said, pointing to the diagram of the poor. "Income comes in, immediately goes out for expenses. There are no assets, only survival expenses. They live paycheck to paycheck, always on the brink of financial disaster." Then he pointed to the diagram of the middle class. "This is where your father and most successful people are. They make more money, but they also acquire more liabilities: bigger house, newer car, more credit cards. Your cash flow looks like this. The income comes in, it goes to pay liabilities that they confuse with assets. They're caught up in what I call the rat race." Finally, he showed the diagram of the rich. The rich focus on building the asset column. Your assets generate income. That income pays for your expenses and is left to buy more assets. It's a virtuous cycle. Money works for them, not the other way around. Robert studied the diagrams until they were etched in his mind. It was so simple, so obvious, but I'd never seen it this way before. "Why doesn't the school teach this?" he asked. The Rich Dad laughed bitterly. "Who controls the education system? The government. What does the government need? Employees and soldiers, not businessmen. The system is designed to produce people who follow orders, not people who think financially. But teachers are good people trapped in a bad system. Your father is a good man, a smart man, but he was never taught about money, so he teaches what he knows, how to be a good employee. He cannot teach what he does not know." Over the next few months, Rich Dad delved deeper into Robert's financial education. He taught him to read financial statements, to understand the difference between capital gains and cash flow, to recognize investment opportunities. Financial intelligence, he explained, is not how much money you make, but how much money you keep. How hard does that money work for you, and for how many generations do you keep it? One day, he took Robert and Mike to visit his accountant. The man, small and meticulous, had stacks of documents on his desk. "How much did you pay in taxes last year?" the Rich Dad asked. "Personally? Almost nothing. Your corporations paid hundreds of thousands, but you as an individual paid very little." Robert was confused. "How is that possible? My dad pays almost 50% of his salary in taxes." The accountant smiled. "Your dad is an employee. Employees pay taxes first and live with what's left. Business owners spend first and pay taxes on what's left." It was another revelation.
Rich Dad explained how corporations, originally created to protect the assets of the wealthy from lawsuits, had become the perfect tool for tax protection. A corporation, he said, is just a binder with a few legal documents, but it's one of the wealthy's most powerful tools. Your father works for a corporation.
I own corporations. That's the difference. Robert learned about the history of taxation, as it did not originally exist in America, how it was introduced temporarily to finance wars, and how it eventually became permanent. The taxes were sold to the public as a way to punish the Rich Dad explained. But the rich are smart. They found legal ways to avoid taxes. So, who ends up paying? The middle class. Always the middle class. One Saturday, Rich Dad hosted what he called an investment game with Robert and Mike. He gave each of them an imaginary $1,000 and told them to create an investment portfolio with that money. They had to research, choose investments, and track their performance for a month. Mike chose shares of large, established companies. Safe, Robert said, remembering the lessons on risk and reward. He chose a mix of smaller, more aggressive actions. By the end of the month, Mike's portfolio had gained a modest 2%. Robert's had lost 5%. "What did you learn?" the Rich Dad asked Robert. "I don't know what I'm doing," Robert admitted. "Exactly, and that is a valuable lesson. Most people lose money on investments because they invest in things they don't understand. They believe that investing is gambling. It is not. Investing is understanding." Rich Dad then taught them about the different types of investments: real estate, stocks, bonds, commodities. Each had its own rules, its own risks and rewards. "It's not about which investment is better," he explained. "It's about which investment you understand best. I love real estate because I can see it, touch it, improve it. I can add value. With the shares, I am at the mercy of the market and the management of the company." A particularly powerful lesson came when Rich Dad took the boys to a slum in the city. The houses were deteriorated, the gardens were neglected, there was graffiti on the walls. "What do you see?" he asked. "A mess," Mike said. "Poverty," Robert added. "I see opportunity," said the Rich Dad. "This neighborhood is 3 miles from the new development center that the city is building. In 5 years, these lands will be worth 10 times what they cost today. The poor who live here will be displaced, which is sad, but it is the reality of urban development. The question is, will you be the one who benefits, or will you be the displaced one?" It was a hard lesson about the reality of capitalism. The Rich Dad was not insensitive to the suffering of the poor, but he understood that the system worked a certain way, and one could be a victim or a beneficiary. "I didn't create the rules," he said, "but I understand them, and I use them. If you want to change the system, you must first understand it. You can't fight against something you don't understand." Rich Dad also taught about the power of leverage, both financial and time. "When you work for money," he explained, "you're limited by the hours of the day. Even the most successful doctors and lawyers have a limit to how much they can make because they sell their time. But when your money works for you, there's no limit. Money can work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year." He showed them how he used the bank's money to buy property. "Why use my own money when I can use the bank's money? If I buy a $100,000 property with $20,000 mine and $80,000 from the bank, and that property generates $1,000 a month after paying the mortgage, what is my return on my investment?" Robert calculated 60% a year on the $20,000. "Right. But if I had used $100,000 of my own money, the return would only be 12%. Leverage multiplies returns. Of course, it also multiplies losses if you don't know what you're doing." One of the most important lessons came when Rich Dad showed them his own personal financial statements compared to those of an average person. "Look," he said, pointing to the columns, "the average person has a job as their only source of income. If you lose that job, you lose everything. I have 7 sources of income: 3 rental properties, 2 businesses, stock dividends, and bond interest. If one source dries up, I have 6 more. That's true security."
Robert began to understand that financial literacy wasn't just about making money, but about protecting it and multiplying it. It was about creating systems and structures that automatically generated wealth. Most people work for money, Rich Dad said. The rich make money work for them. But to do that, you need to understand how money works, and that requires financial education. Rich Dad also taught about the power of advisors. The rich have teams, he explained. Accountants, lawyers, brokers, bankers. I don't try to be an expert in everything. I hire experts and pay them well. A good accountant can save you more in taxes than they charge in fees. A good lawyer can protect your assets. A good broker can find you opportunities that you would never see alone. But caution, make sure your advisors are investors themselves. Many financial advisors are broke. How can someone who is broke advise you on how to be rich? One afternoon, Rich Dad gave Robert and Mike an exercise they would never forget. He asked them to create a personal financial statement. But we don't have anything, Mike protested. Exactly, and until they see it on paper, they won't really understand their situation. Most people don't know where they are financially because they never sit down to do this. The kids created their financial statements: income, their small part-time jobs; expenses, food, entertainment, transportation; assets, almost nothing; passive, nothing. Now, Rich Dad said, he believes in the financial state they want to have in 10 years. The boys dreamed big: multiple sources of income, properties, businesses. Okay, now the question is, how do they get from here to there? That's their financial plan. Without a plan, they're just dreams. Chapter 4. The third lesson. Take care of your own business. Continuation. No, interrupted the rich father. That's Xerox's business. What is your business? Robert fell silent. I didn't have an answer. That's your problem, Rich Dad continued, and it's most people's problem. They take care of everyone's business except their own. They work all their lives making someone else rich. Rich Dad got up and walked to his office window, looking over his various businesses and properties. Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's, once went to speak to an MBA class, asked them, "What business am I in?" The students laughed and said, "Everyone knows you're in the hamburger business." Ray smiled and said, "I'm in the real estate business. McDonald's owns more real estate than any other organization in the world. Hamburgers only finance the acquisition of real estate." Robert was beginning to understand. So, my job at Xerox is your profession, not your business. Your profession is how you make money. Your business is what you do with that money. Most people confuse their profession with their business. They spend their entire lives strengthening someone else's business. Over the next few years, while Robert worked at Xerox during the day, he built his business in the evenings and weekends. The rich dad guided him, but he didn't give him money. "If I give you money," he said, "you won't learn. Easy money creates poor habits." Robert started small, investing in his financial education. He attended real estate seminars on the weekends. He read every book he could find on investing. He met with other investors to learn from their experiences. Your business, Rich Dad explained, revolves around your asset column, not your income column. The rich focus on their asset column, while everyone else focuses on their income statements. Robert learned that there are different types of assets that one can accumulate. Businesses that require his presence. If you have to be there to make it work, it's not a business, Rich Dad said. Robert began looking for business opportunities that could function without him. Not just any stock, but shares in companies that he understood and believed in their future. Rich Dad taught him how to read annual reports, understand balance sheets, and recognize when a company was undervalued. Bonds. Bonds are the game of banks, Rich Dad explained. You lend money and receive interest. It's boring, but safe. Well, to preserve wealth, not so much to create it. Mutual funds, for smart sloths, the Rich Dad joked. You let others handle your money. It's not bad, but you'll never have real control. Income-generating real estate. This was Rich Dad's favorite. Real estate is tangible. You can improve it, you can leverage it, and everyone needs a place to live. Notes and promissory notes. Become the bank, he said. Borrow money and charge interest, but only if you understand the risk.
Copyrights. Ideas can be the most valuable assets if you know how to protect and monetize them. One day, Robert found his first such real opportunity. A colleague at Xerox mentioned that he was getting divorced and needed to sell his condo quickly. He was asking for $50,000, but Robert had done his research and knew that similar properties were selling for $65,000. "I don't have $50,000, Robert told Rich Dad. "How much do you have?" "5,000 saved. It is enough for the hook. The bank will lend the rest if the numbers work out." Robert made his first real estate purchase. He rented the condo for $750 a month. After paying the mortgage, taxes, and maintenance, she had $150 a month left. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "Now you have an asset," Rich Dad said. "Small, but it's yours. More importantly, you now understand the process. Repeat." Meanwhile, at Xerox, Robert became one of the best salespeople, but he noticed something disturbing. The best salespeople weren't necessarily the ones who progressed in the company, the ones who played politics, the ones who pleased the bosses. Those were the ones who got promoted. "Are you learning a valuable lesson?" said Rich Dad when Robert shared his frustration. "In the corporate world, it's not about how good you are, but what you also play the game. That's why you need your own business. In your business, results are the only thing that matters." Robert began to see his work at Xerox differently. It wasn't his career, it was his school. He was learning sales, systems, management, everything he would need for his own business. A coworker, noticing that Robert was always reading finance books during lunch, asked him, "Why do you bother with all that? We have a good pension plan here." Robert looked at the company's pension plan. If he worked 30 years, he would receive 60% of his final salary. He did the math. If he earned $100,000 a year, a high salary for the time, he would receive $60,000 a year in retirement. After taxes, maybe $40,000. Enough to survive, not to live. "That's the deal they offer you," Rich Dad told him. "Give the best years of your life, and we will give you enough not to starve to death in your old age. Do you think it's fair?" Robert stepped up his efforts. Every extra dollar he earned in commissions went into his asset column. He bought his second property, then his third. He started investing in stocks, but only in companies he fully understood. "Never invest in something you don't understand," Rich Dad repeated. "If you can't explain it to a 10-year-old, you don't understand it enough to invest in it." A fundamental principle that Rich Dad taught was the difference between being rich and looking rich. "Your neighbor with the new Mercedes and the big house is probably broke," he said. "The truly wealthy often live below their means. They buy assets, not luxuries. The luxuries come later, paid for by the assets." Robert learned to resist social pressure. While his colleagues bought new cars and bigger houses with each raise, Robert maintained his modest lifestyle and poured all the extra into assets. "The asset column is like a tree," Rich Dad explained. "You plant the seed, you water it, you take care of it. For years, it doesn't produce anything. But if you're patient, it eventually bears fruit, and those fruits contain seeds for more trees. Most people eat the seeds instead of planting them." A pivotal moment came when Robert was promoted to sales manager. It was a great honor, better pay, more prestige, but it required constant travel and working 60 to 70 hours a week. "If I take this promotion," he reflected with Rich Dad, "I won't have time for my business." "There's your answer," Rich Dad replied. "What is more important, to look successful or be successful?" Robert refused the promotion. His colleagues thought he was crazy. His poor dad was devastated. "How can you turn down such an opportunity?" he asked incredulously. But Robert knew something they didn't. His side business was already generating almost as much as his salary. A few more months and he could quit completely. Rich Dad taught him about the power of corporations to protect assets. "A corporation is a separate legal entity," he explained. "It can own things, take risks, and if something goes wrong, you personally are protected. The rich don't own anything personally. Their corporations own everything." Robert formed his first corporation to hold his investment properties. He learned about the tax advantages, the legal protections, the strategies that the wealthy had used for centuries. "Employees earn, pay taxes, and spend what's left," Rich Dad said. Business owners earn, spend on business expenses, and pay taxes on what's left. Do you see the difference? The difference was revolutionary. An employee earning $100,000 paid taxes on his entire income. As a corporation owner, you could deduct business expenses before paying taxes. Travel, meals, education, it could all be a business expense if done correctly. One day, Rich Dad took him to an upscale neighborhood. Huge houses, luxury cars at every entrance. "What do you see?" he asked. "Wealth," Robert replied. "I see slavery," said the rich dad. "Golden slavery, but slavery. Each of these people probably works 60 hours a week to pay for all this. They can't stop working for a month without everything collapsing. That's not wealth, it's an expensive prison." Then he took him to a modest neighborhood. Normal houses, normal cars. The owner of that house points to a particularly ordinary house. It owns 50 rental properties. He lives here by choice. He could live anywhere, but understand that a big house is just ego, not investment. Robert learned to differentiate between ego and financial intelligence. The ego buys to impress. Intelligence buys to generate returns. Your business, the rich dad repeated, is not your profession. Your business is what you make with the money you earn from your profession. If you spend everything you earn, you have no business. You only have a job. After 5 years at Xerox, Robert finally quit. His asset column generated more than enough to live on. His poor dad was horrified. "How can you give up such security?" asked Dad. Robert replied gently, "Security is an illusion. The only real security is your ability to produce, and that comes from taking care of your own business."
Could pay $40,000 in taxes, leaving them $60,000 to spend. A corporation owner earning $100,000 could spend $60,000 on legitimate business expenses and tax only $40,000 remaining. But that's legal, Robert asked. Completely legal. In fact, the tax code is written to encourage this. The government wants entrepreneurs to create jobs and stimulate the economy, so they give them tax breaks, but only if you know how to use the rules. Rich Dad explained the 4 areas of financial intelligence that the rich master. Accounting, the language of money. If you can't read financial statements, you're flying blind. Investing, the art and science of making money make more money. Understanding of markets, the law of supply and demand. Know when something is overrated or undervalued. The law, knowing the rules of the game and how to use them to your advantage. The rich hire the best accountants and lawyers, Rich Dad continues, not to break the law, but to use the law. There are thousands of pages of tax code. Do you think it's all there to collect taxes? No. Most are there to give you legal ways to reduce taxes if you know where to look. Robert learned about different corporate structures: C corporations, S corporations, LLCs, limited partnerships. Each had its own tax advantages and disadvantages. "Your father," said the rich father, referring to Robert's poor father, "he is a W-2 employee. All of your income is recorded at the highest rates. You have no significant deductions. You have no control. I, on the other hand, have 7 different legal entities. Each serves a different purpose, each with its own tax advantages." One day, Rich Dad took Robert to lunch at an expensive restaurant. During the meal, they discussed business, investments, strategies. In the end, Rich Dad paid with a corporate credit card. "This lunch," he said, "is a deductible business expense. We discussed business. It's perfectly legal. Your father, if he came here, would pay with after-tax money. This meal cost me 50 cents on the dollar. It would cost him the full dollar." It was a simple lesson, but profound. Multiplied by hundreds of expenses per year, the difference was enormous. Rich Dad also taught about the power of paper losses. If one of my investments loses money, I can use that loss to offset gains in other investments. It's as if the government shared my losses with me. An employee does not have that luxury. Robert learned about depreciation, especially in real estate. "You buy a building for $1 million, Rich Dad explained. The government allows you to depreciate it for 27.5 years. That's about $6,000 a year in deductions. Even though the building is probably increasing in value, it's free money from the government. But when you sell, you have to pay taxes on that recaptured depreciation," Robert said. "Ah," smiled Rich Dad, "unless you make a 1031 trade, sell one property and buy another of equal or greater value and defer taxes indefinitely. Some investors never pay those taxes, die, and their heirs get a stared basis. Taxes disappear. It was almost magical, but perfectly legal. The rich had written the rules to benefit themselves. Rich Dad also explained the difference between earned income, portfolio income, and passive income. Earned income, your wages, is recorded at the highest rates, up to 50% or more with state taxes. Long-term capital gains, portfolio income, is recorded at much lower rates, perhaps 15 to 20%. Passive income can be protected with depreciation and other deductions. What kind of income do you think the rich prefer? Robert began to structure his businesses differently. He created a holding corporation that owned his other corporations. He created a management corporation that charged management fees to his properties. Each structure had a specific fiscal purpose. This is not tax evasion, the rich dad emphasized. It is tax planning. Evasion is illegal. Planning is smart. If the government didn't want you to do this, they would change the laws. But they don't because the very people who write the laws benefit from them. One particularly telling lesson came when Rich Dad showed Robert the financial statements of one of his corporations. This corporation, he said, owns my luxury car. It's a company car. The corporation pays for the car, insurance, gas, maintenance, everything is deductible because I use the car for business. If I, as an individual, bought that car, I would have to use after-tax money. The difference is huge. Robert calculated a $50,000 car. If you bought it personally, after earning $100,000 and paying 50% in taxes, it would actually cost you $100,000 in gross income. But as a corporate expense, it cost only $50,000 in pre-tax income. Employees buy luxuries with engraved money, the rich dad summarized. Business owners buy luxuries with pre-tax money. Who do you think can afford more luxuries? Rich Dad also taught about the power of time and taxes. The government wants your money now, but if you're smart, you can defer taxes for years, decades, maybe forever. The money you would have paid in taxes may be working for you, earning compound interest. He showed Robert strategies such as corporate retirement plans, whole life insurance, deferred annuities, all legal ways to postpone or avoid taxes. Your father, he said, referring to the poor father, probably has a 401k. That's fine, but it's limited. As a business owner, I can have a defined benefit plan and contribute hundreds of thousands a year, all deductible. Robert was amazed. It was as if there were two completely different sets of rules, one for employees and one for business owners. They're not different rules, they're the same rules. It's just that employees don't know about them or can't use them. They're trapped in the W-2 system. One day, Rich Dad took Robert to a meeting with his team of advisors, his accountant, his tax lawyer, his financial planner. Robert listened as they discussed strategies he had never imagined. We could establish a fiduciary and grantor retained annuity trust, transfer fast-growing assets now, paying a small gift tax, and all future growth is out of your estate. Or consider a qualified personal residence trust for the vacation home, the accountant added. Deductions now and property passes to children at a discount. It was a completely different language, a world that 99% of people would never see. This is what Rich Dad said after the meeting. It's why I pay these guys hundreds of thousands a year, but they save me millions. An employee sees their fees as an expense. I see them as an investment. Chapter 6, the fifth lesson. The rich invent money. It was 1980 and the economy was in recession. Interest rates were skyrocketing, unemployment was high, and economic pessimism was palpable. For most, it was a time of fear and contraction. For the rich dad, it was a time of opportunity. Money isn't real, Rich Dad said as he and Robert walked through a neighborhood filled with homes with for sale and foreclosure signs. It's just an idea, and if you can understand that, you can create money out of thin air. Robert had heard this philosophy before, but now, with several years of business experience, he was beginning to truly understand it. Look at that house, Rich Dad pointed to a particularly dilapidated property. What do you see? A disaster, Robert replied. You probably need $30,000 in repairs. I see $100,000 in profit, said Rich Dad. That house is selling for $50,000 because the owner is desperate. $30,000 in repairs will be worth $200,000 in this neighborhood. But here's the beautiful part. I don't need the $80,000. How is that possible? Rich Dad smiled. Observe and learn. For
For the next few weeks, Robert watched as Rich Dad orchestrated a complex but elegant deal. He first negotiated the price at $42,000, arguing that he needed that discount to justify the risk. The seller, facing foreclosure, agreed. Then he found a contractor who agreed to make the repairs for $25,000, but did not require payment until the house was sold. In return, he promised him all his future renovation work. Then he went to a private investor and proposed to him to lend $42,000 to buy this house. I will pay you 15% annual interest, and you will have the first mortgage on the property. In 6 months, when you sell the house, you will get your money back plus interest. The investor, seeing the solid guarantee, agreed. And finally, before he even closed on the purchase, Rich Dad found a buyer who agreed to buy the renovated house for $195,000, with closing in 6 months. Now look at the math, Rich Dad said to Robert. Buy $42,000, money from the investor, renewals $25,000, payable when selling, interest $3,150, 6 months at 15% per annum, sale $195,000. Profit, $124,850.
And how much of your own money did you use? He asked Robert. Zero, Robert replied in amazement. Exactly. I created $4,850 from scratch with only knowledge, creativity, and courage. That's what I mean when I say that the rich invent money. This lesson completely transformed Robert's understanding of money and wealth. It wasn't about having money, it was about knowing how to create it. Most people, Rich Dad explained, wait until they have money to make money. They hope to win the lottery, receive an inheritance, get a raise. While they wait, opportunities pass. The rich don't wait. Rich Dad believed he distinguished between 2 types of investors: those who buy packaged investments, go to a bank or broker and buy something already done, a mutual fund, a REIT, a stock. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's like buying a house that's already built. You get what everyone else gets. The ones that create investments, these are the real players. They see opportunities where others see problems. They put deals together. They connect people. They create value where it didn't exist. To be the second type, he continued, you need to develop 3 main skills. First skill, finding opportunities that everyone else overlooks. Most people go through life with their eyes closed, Rich Dad said. They see a house for sale and think, I don't have the money. I see a house for sale and I think, how can I make this work? It's a completely different mindset. Robert learned to see opportunities everywhere: a vacant piece of land that would be perfect for parking, a bankrupt business that only needed better management, an inventor with a great idea but no business skills, 2 people with complementary resources who did not know each other. Second skill, gathering money. Money is everywhere, the Rich Dad taught. There are billions of dollars circulating the globe every day looking for a home. Your job is to give them an attractive home. Robert learned different sources of financing: traditional banks, the most difficult and restrictive; private lenders, more flexible but more expensive; seller's financing, the seller acts as a bank; investment partners, share risk and reward; money from others, OPM, other people's money. Never say, I can't afford it, Rich Dad insisted. Question, how can I pay for it? The first statement closes your mind. The second opens it. Third skill, organizing intelligent people. You don't need to be the smartest, Rich Dad said. You just need to know how to organize people who are smarter than you into specific areas. Robert learned to build teams of accountants who understood complex tax strategies, lawyers who could structure deals creatively, contractors who could renew efficiently, agents who knew the market intimately, investors who trusted their judgment. If you're the smartest person on your team, Rich Dad warned, your team is in trouble. A particularly illustrative example came when Rich Dad showed Robert how he had bought a 100-unit apartment building without using any of his own money. The building was selling for millions of dollars, he said. The owner wanted $400,000 down payment. I didn't have $400,000, but that didn't stop me. Here's what he did. He negotiated the price at $1,750,000, arguing necessary repairs. He
He convinced the seller to take $100,000 at closing and a promissory note for $50,000 payable in 5 years. He found a partner who put up the $100,000 in exchange for 25% ownership. He obtained a bank loan for $1,500,000. He used the building's cash flow to pay off all the loans. He refinanced 2 years later when rates dropped and took out $500,000 tax-free. Within 2 years, Rich Dad said, I owned 75% of a $2 million building and had $500,000 in cash in my pocket, all without using a penny of mine. That is inventing money. But Rich Dad also warned of the dangers of being too creative. There's a line between creative and sloppy, he said. Always have multiple exit strategies. Always keep reserves. Never bet what you can't lose. Confidence is good. Arrogance is fatal. Robert learned this the hard way when he tried his first creative deal. He found an only house that he could buy for $60,000, fix for $15,000, and sell for $100,000. He convinced an investor to lend the money, but he didn't properly investigate the contractor who took the money and disappeared. Robert had to find emergency funds to complete the renovations and barely broke even. Good lesson, said Rich Dad. A beat $5,000. Some pay millions for that education, or never learn it. Rich Dad also taught about the speed of money. Stuck money is dead money, he said. Money in motion creates more money. He showed Robert how he recycled the same capital over and over. Buy a property, fix it quickly, sell or refinance it, get the original capital plus profit, repeat with a larger property. Most people buy an investment and sit on it for 30 years, he explained. I use the same money 10 times in those 30 years. Who do you think earns the most? One particularly powerful technique that Rich Dad taught was the concept of infinite return. My goal, he said, is to get my original money out as quickly as possible and keep the asset, so I have a free asset that continues to produce income. For example, buy 1,000 shares at $10, $10,000 invested. The stock rises to $20. Sell 500 shares for $10,000. Keep 500 shares free forever. Now it doesn't matter if the stock goes up or down, he explained. I have nothing to lose. It's free money making free money. Rich Dad also taught about the power of specialized knowledge. Information is the new currency, he said, years before the internet made it obvious. An example, Rich Dad knew that the city planned to extend a main road. This information was public, buried in minutes of council meetings, but few people knew it. He bought land along the planned route for agricultural prices. 2 years later, when the highway was announced, the values tripled. It wasn't luck, he emphasized. It was research. I spent hours in the city library reading boring documents that no one else would read. Those hours made me millions. Chapter 7. The sixth lesson. Work to learn, not for money. By 1985, Robert had published his first book and was doing press interviews. A talented young journalist interviewed him, and during the conversation, she mentioned that she was also an aspiring writer. I've written several novels, she said proudly, but no publisher accepts them. I don't understand why. My writing teachers say I have talent. Robert had seen this scenario many times. Can I give you some advice? He asked. She nodded anxiously. Take a sales course. The journalist's expression changed from hopeful to offended. Sales? I'm a writer, not a salesman. I have a master's degree in English literature. I didn't lower my education to become a salesman. Robert gently pointed to the cover of his book, where it said, best-selling author. Notice that it doesn't say best writer, he said. It says bestseller. I'm a mediocre writer, but I'm an excellent salesman. You're an excellent writer who does not know how to sell. Who do you think is more successful? The journalist remained silent, processing this uncomfortable truth. This interaction perfectly encapsulated what Rich Dad had taught Robert for years. Success isn't just about being good at something, it's about having the right skills that complement each other. Your father, Rich Dad had said years ago, referring to Robert's poor dad, is the smartest man I know in education, but he only knows about education. He's a specialist. I'm a generalist. I know a little about a lot of things, and that makes me rich while he struggles. Rich Dad had insisted that Robert learn multiple skills.
Sales, the most important skill in business. If you can't sell, you can't be an entrepreneur. That's why Robert had taken the job at Xerox, despite having higher paying offers. Xerox had the best sales training program in America. Robert endured 2 years of rejection and failure before becoming one of the best salesmen. Each cold was an education, he remembered. I learned more about human nature in those 2 years than in all my school years. Systems. A business is a system. If you don't understand systems, you'll always be part of someone else's system. Robert worked in different departments of various companies, learning how each part worked. Accounting, how money flows; marketing, how to attract customers; production, how to create value efficiently; human resources, how to manage people; legal, how to protect yourself. You don't need to be an expert in every area, Rich Dad taught, but you need to understand how all the pieces fit together. Communication. Money flows to good communicators. If you can't communicate your vision, no one will buy it.
Robert took courses in public speaking, persuasive writing, negotiation, leadership. Your father may be brilliant, said Rich Dad, but if he can't communicate his ideas in ways that inspire action, his brilliance dies with him. Management. There are 2 types, systems management and people management. You need both. The Rich Dad distinguished between managing systems, creating processes that work without you, documenting procedures, automating where possible, constantly measuring and improving. People management. Inspire, not just lead. Understand individual motivations. Build teams, not just hire employees. Develop leaders, not just followers. Most managers, Rich Dad watched, they are good at one but terrible at the other. Great leaders dominate both. Robert learned these lessons through painful experience. His first company failed because he couldn't sell. The second failed because he didn't understand systems. The third failed because it could not manage people. Every failure was $1 million education, Rich Dad said. Most people pay $100,000 for a college education that prepares them to work for others. You are getting an education that prepares you for others to work for you. The concept of working to learn extended beyond technical skills. Rich Dad insisted that Robert experience different industries and cultures. Join the Marines, Rich Dad had suggested when Robert was young, not for the money, but for leadership, discipline, and life experience. Robert followed the advice. Military training taught him leadership under pressure, fast decision-making, teamwork, overcoming fear, personal discipline. Flying helicopter gunships in Vietnam taught me more about risk management than any MBA, Robert reflected. After the Army, Rich Dad suggested that Robert work for an international company. You need to understand global business. The world is getting smaller. Robert worked for a shipping company, traveling in Asia in the Pacific. He learned cultural differences in business, international trade, supply chain management, cross-cultural negotiation. Each port was a lesson, he remembered. I learned that what works in America can fail in Japan, that Brazilians negotiate differently than Germans, that time means something different in each culture. Rich Dad also emphasized the importance of learning from multiple mentors. I can teach you about money and business, he said, but find other mentors for other areas. No one knows everything. Robert sought out mentors in spirituality, a Buddhist monk who taught inner peace; Salute, a trainer who taught the mind-body connection; relationships, a marriage counselor who taught emotional communication; creativity, an artist who taught to think outside the box. Success is holistic, Rich Dad taught. He can be rich and miserable. What's the point of that? A crucial lesson was about the moment to stop learning and start doing. Some use learning as an excuse not to act, Rich Dad warned. There is always one more course to take, one more book to read. At some point, you must jump. Rich Dad had a rule. Learn until you know 70% of what you need. The other 30% you will learn by doing it. If you expect to know 100%, you will never start. The difference between working to learn and working for money became clear when Robert compared his trajectory to that of his classmates. His peers had taken high-paying jobs immediately after college. By the age of 30, they were earning 6 figures.
Robert, hopping from job to job, learning different skills, earned much less. My friends laughed at me, I remembered. They called me eternally a student, without direction. They thought I was wasting my education. But by 40, the situation had been reversed. Robert's peers were stuck in jobs they hated with skills that were only good for one industry. Too specialized to change, too indebted to risk. Robert, with his diverse set of skills, had built multiple businesses, had income from multiple sources, and could pivot quickly when markets changed. They worked for money, he reflected. I worked to learn. They became obsolete. I became versatile. The rich dad had a saying, "The average worker is one skill away from wealth," he explained. An accountant who learns sales can start his own firm. An engineer who learns marketing can launch a product. An artist who learns business can monetize their art. But most never learn that second skill. Chapter 8. Overcoming Obstacles. It was 1990, and Robert was sitting with Rich Dad in his office. Despite years of education and experience, Robert still struggled to achieve the level of success he desired. He knew the lessons, he understood the principles, but something was holding him back. "I know a lot of people like you," Rich Dad said. "Intelligent, educated, hardworking. They know what to do, but they don't do it. Do you know why?" Robert shook his head. "Because knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. And what prevents people from applying what they know are 5 main obstacles. Obstacle 1. Fear. The fear of losing money is real," Rich Dad began. "Everyone has it. The difference is not the absence of fear, but how you handle fear." Rich Dad shared his own story of failure. By age 30, he had lost everything in a bad investment. His family was temporarily homeless, living in his car. "That was the darkest moment of my life," he admitted, "but also the most educational. I learned that surviving failure eliminates the fear of failure." He distinguished between 2 types of people: those who let fear paralyze them, keep their money in the bank, buy government bonds, avoid all risky investments, and slowly, inflation eats away at their wealth. The fear of losing makes them lose anyway, just more slowly. Those who use fear as fuel. Recognize fear, analyze it, learn from it. Fear tells them where they need more education, more preparation, more safeguards. "Look at the Texans," Rich Dad said. His attitude is, if you win big. If you lose big. That mentality built oil fortunes. They're not afraid to lose because they know they only need to win once big. Rich Dad taught specific techniques for managing fear. Start small. Don't invest $100,000 if losing 1,000 keeps you up at night. Build your risk tolerance gradually. Educate yourself obsessively. Fear often comes from ignorance. The more you know, the less fearful you will be. Have a plan B, C, and D. Always have multiple exit strategies. Fear subsides when you know you have options. Accept losses as tuition. Every loss is a lesson. I've lost millions, and each loss taught me something that made me tens of millions. Failure is part of the success process, he emphasized. Those who avoid failure also avoid success. Obstacle 3. Laziness. "Now this will surprise you," said the Rich Dad. "The laziest people are often the busiest." Robert was confused. How can someone busy be lazy? Because they use being busy to avoid important things. It's laziness by evasion. They're too busy to take care of their health, too busy to improve their finances, too busy for important relationships. Being busy is the most common form of laziness. The Rich Dad identified symptoms of this busy laziness.
Work 60 hours but never read a finance book. Being too tired to exercise. Not having time to plan investments. Postponing important financial conversations. "I know executives who make millions but are broke," he said. "Too busy to manage their money." That is pure laziness. The cure for laziness was not more discipline, but more ambition. "Most people will tell you to reduce your desires," explained Rich Dad. "I say, expand them. Don't say, I can't afford it. Say, how can I pay for it?" Desire is the antidote to laziness. He shared his own technique. "When I want something expensive, I don't deny it. I use it as motivation. I want that yacht, so I need to create millions of dollars in extra cash flow.
That gets me out of laziness very quickly. Obstacle 4. Bad habits. Habits control your life more than your intellect, Rich Dad taught. You can know everything about finances, but if your habits are poor, you'll be poor. He identified the most common destructive habits. Pay everyone first except yourself. Most pay their bills first and pay themselves with what's left, if there is anything left. The rich pay first. Spending to impress. Buying things you don't need with money that you don't have to impress people you don't care about. Failing to review financial statements. Most do not know how much they earn, how much they spend, how much they owe. They live in willful financial ignorance. Socialize with financial losers. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If all your friends are broke, you probably are too. The Rich Dad had a system for changing habits. Identify the destructive habits specifically. Understand the real cost of the habit, not just financial. Replace with a positive habit. Don't just eliminate. Practice the new habit for at least 30 days. Have responsibility for someone who watches you. I changed my habit from watching television to reading financial reports, shared Ted A. Those 3 hours a day, multiplied by years, made me millions. Obstacle 5. Arrogance. Arrogance is ego plus ignorance, defined the rich father. It's thinking that what you don't know doesn't matter. He told about a doctor friend who had lost all his wealth to bad investments. He was brilliant in medicine, so he assumed he would be brilliant in investments. His arrogance cost him everything. Arrogance manifests itself in several ways. Do not ask for help. The arrogant think that asking for help is a sign of weakness. The intelligent know that it is a sign of wisdom. Do not admit ignorance. They prefer to pretend they know rather than admit that they don't. That way they never learn. Despising basic knowledge. They think they are beyond the basics, but the basics are fundamental. Not listening. They're so busy talking that they never listen, and in silence is learning. When I don't know something, Rich Dad would say, I find an expert or buy a book. Arrogance is expensive. Education is cheap in comparison. Robert recalled a time when his arrogance almost cost him dearly. He had been successful in real estate and thought he could apply the same strategies to the stock market without education additional. He lost $50,000 in a month. It was a $50,000 humbling lesson, he admitted. Now, before entering any new area, I spend months studying and consulting experts, integrating the lessons. The Rich Dad concluded with a profound observation. These 5 obstacles are not independent. They feed off each other. Fear creates cynicism. Cynicism justifies laziness. Laziness becomes a bad habit, and bad habits are defended with arrogance. But here's the good news, he continued. Breaking one weakens them all. Overcome your fear, and your cynicism decreases. Eliminate laziness, and your arrogance fades away. They are a chain. It breaks a link, and the whole chain is weakened. He gave Robert a final exercise. Identify which obstacle is your biggest challenge. Focus on that one for 90 days. Don't try to fix everything at once, one obstacle at a time. For Robert, it was fear. He spent the next 90 days making a small investment each week, no matter how scared he was. Some worked, some didn't, but each one reduced their fear. At the end of the 90 days, Robert recalled, the fear was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I recognized it, analyzed it, and acted anyway. That was the difference between my poor self and my rich self. Chapter 9. Starting the 10 Steps to Awakening Your Financial Genius. It was 1995, and Robert had achieved financial freedom. His investments generated more than enough to cover his expenses. While celebrating with Rich Dad, he presented her with a new challenge. Now that you're free, Rich Dad said, what are you going to do with that freedom? Robert hadn't thought beyond achieving financial freedom. I guess enjoy it. That'll last about 6 months, smiled Rich Dad. Then you'll get bored. The real question is, how are you going to use your freedom to help others find theirs? That's when Robert decided to teach what he'd learned and began developing what he called the 10 Steps to Awakening Your Financial Genius. Step 1. You need a reason greater than reality. The power of dreams versus reality, Robert began when he gave his first talk on financial freedom. Most don't get rich because their reasons aren't strong enough.
She shared her own want and don't want list. I don't want to work my whole life for someone else, depend on the government when you are old, dying with debts, wasting time with negative people, being a slave to money. I want freedom to travel whenever I want, time with my family, no financial worries, ability to help generously, control over my time, leaving a legacy. Without these deep emotional reasons, Robert explained, you'll quit when it gets tough, and it always gets hard. An attendee raised his hand. My reason is not to be poor. That's a fear-based reason, Robert replied. It works, but it's limiting. It's like driving in the rear-view mirror. It's better to have a vision of where you're going, not just what you're escaping. Step 2. I choose daily. Every day, with every dollar, you choose to be rich, poor, or middle class, Robert taught. The power is in conscious choice. He gave examples of daily choices: choosing to learn versus being entertained, choosing to invest versus spend, choosing to partner with winners versus losers, choosing to act versus procrastinating. Most let choices happen by default, he explained. They watch TV because it's there, not because they chose to watch it. They spend because they have money, not because they chose to spend. Wealth comes from conscious choices. He shared his daily choices routine. 5 a.m. I choose to get up early to read markets. 6 a.m. I choose to exercise to maintain energy. 7 a.m. I choose to review financial statements. 8 a.m. I choose to work in non-passive assets. 12 noon. I choose to have lunch with people from whom I can learn. 6 p.m. I choose to have dinner with family. Balance. 9 p.m. I choose to read instead of watching TV. It's not perfect every day, he admitted, but conscious intention changes everything. Step 3. Choose friends carefully. I don't choose friends because of their financial status, Robert clarified, but I am aware of what I learn from each one. He categorized the people in his life. Prosperous friends. I learn strategies, opportunities, mindset. I don't ask for money, I ask for knowledge. Friends fighting. I learn what not to do, what to avoid, what pitfalls exist. Negative friends. I love you, but I limit exposure. Negativity is contagious. The trick is not to judge, but to learn, he emphasized. They are all teachers if you pay attention. Step 4. Master a formula and then learn a new one. Most learn a formula in school, work for money, Robert explained, and use that formula all their life, wondering why it doesn't work better. He shared his progression of formulas. First formula: buy houses in foreclosure. I mastered it in 2 years. It worked until the market changed. Second formula: buy with seller financing. Learned when banks got strict, it opened new opportunities. Third formula: syndication of investments. Raise money from investors. It allowed for bigger deals. Fourth formula: investment in business. Buy existing businesses. More predictable cash flow. Don't give up what works, he warned, but he's always learning the next thing. Markets change, opportunities change. If you only know one formula, you're vulnerable. Step 5. Pay yourself first. This is the most important and most violated step, Robert emphasized. Pay yourself first, not last, the system explained. The money comes in. First, 10 to 20% to investments. Pay you. Second, living expenses. Third, debts and obligations. But I don't have enough to pay myself first, many protested. Then your problem is not money, it's expenses, Robert replied.
Or income, or both. But until you pay yourself first, you'll always be poor, no matter how much you earn. He shared his story of when he was making $30,000 a year. He paid $500 a month first, 20%. He lived on $2,000 a month. Sometimes it was not enough for all accounts. The pressure forced me to be creative, to earn more. The pressure to pay bills after paying me first made me rich, he explained. If you pay bills first, there's no pressure to grow. Chapter 6. Pay your advisors well. Continuation. Professionals. They have their own successful investments. They charge you for results, not for time. They have more experience than you in their area. Their interests are aligned with yours. Sellers live on commissions for selling you products. They don't have their own successful investments. They tell you what you want to hear. They disappear after sale. My accountant saves me $50,000 a year in taxes and pays him $5,000, Robert exemplified. That's a 1,000% return, but most people look for the cheapest accountant and lose fortunes in taxes. He shared criteria for choosing advisors. Question: what are your own investments? If they don't invest in what they recommend, run away. Pay for results when possible. Build long-term relationships. Step 7. Be an Indian donor. In Native American culture, giving in the expectation of receiving something better in return was noble, Robert explained. In white culture, they call it gifting. I prefer the Indian perspective. He applied this concept to investments. When I buy a stock, I want to recoup my initial investment fast and keep the shares for free. When I buy a property, I want to get my down payment back and keep the property. Real example he shared. He bought 10,000 shares of stock at $10,000. Shares rose to $3. He sold 3,333 shares equal to $10,000 recovered. He kept 6,666 shares for free, forever. Now it doesn't matter if the stock goes up or down, he explained. I have nothing to lose. It's free money making free money. Step 8. Use the investments to buy luxuries. The poor and middle class buy luxuries first, Robert taught. The rich buy luxuries in the end. He drew 2 scenarios on the board. Average person. He wants a luxury car. Ask for a loan or use savings. Pay $500 a month for 5 years. Total paid $30,000 plus interest. Rich person wants the same car. Invest the money in assets. Assets generate $500 per month. Buy the car with cash flow. It keeps assets forever. The difference, he emphasized, is that one ends up with a car that depreciates, the other with a car and assets that continue to produce. Step 9. You need heroes. Heroes make the difficult look easy, Robert explained. You need models that inspire you. His financial heroes: Warren Buffett for his patience and analysis, Donald Trump for thinking big, George Soros for understanding market psychology, Peter Lynch for simplifying the complex. I don't idolize them, he clarified. He studied their methods, their thinking, their strategies. When faced with a decision, I ask, what would Buffett do? Step 10. Teach and you will receive. The most powerful principle, Robert concluded. When you teach something, you learn it twice. When you give, you receive multiplied. Ways to apply it. Teach your children about money. Share knowledge with friends. Mentor someone younger. Write about what you learn. Every time I teach, I learn something new, he shared. Students ask questions I never considered. They force me to clarify my thinking. Still want more? Practical actions to get started. After years of teaching these principles, Robert noticed that many people were inspired but paralyzed. They knew what to do, but not how to start. So he developed a list of concrete, small, but powerful actions. Stop what you're doing. Einstein defined insanity as doing the same thing expecting different results, Robert began. If you're not rich, what you're doing doesn't work. Exercise. List everything you do with money for a week. It ticks off everything that brings you closer to financial freedom. Eliminate or reduce everything else. Most find that 90% of their financial actions keep them poor, he watched. Look for new ideas. Your mind is your most valuable asset, he taught. Feed her constantly. Your learning routine. Read a finance book a month, minimum. Listen to financial podcasts while driving. Attend a seminar each quarter. Join an investment club. But don't just consume information, he warned. Apply at least one idea from each book, podcast, or seminar. Knowledge without action is entertainment. Find someone who has done what you want to achieve. Don't reinvent the wheel, Robert advised. Find someone who has already arrived where you want to go. Strategy for finding mentors. Identify exactly what you want to achieve. Look for who has achieved it, not who claims to have achieved it. Offer courage before asking for help. Be specific in your questions. Implement what you learn and report results. Successful mentors love to help those who take action, he explained. They hate wasting time with dreamers. Take classes. Formal education will give you a job, Robert said. Self-education will bring you fortune.
Classes that recommended: basic understanding, accounting, investment analysis, marketing and sales, negotiation, psychology of money, basic tax laws. Spend $500 on a course that saves you or earns you $10,000, he suggested. It's the best return you'll find. Make offers. Lots of offers. He's not free, Robert taught, but most are so afraid of rejection that they never ask. Their challenge: make 10 offers this week. They can be in anything: properties, businesses, services. Expect 9 rejections. Celebrate every no, because it brings you closer to the yes. I made 200 offers before buying my first property, he remembered. 199 didn't teach me that it worked. The 200th yes made me $25,000. Walk or drive in different areas. Opportunities are everywhere, Robert said, but you have to go out and look for them. His exploration routine: once a week, explore a new neighborhood. Look for patterns: businesses closing, opening, construction. Talk to locals. What's changing? Notice trends before the masses. I found my best investments just by watching, he shared. I saw a Starbucks opening in a bad neighborhood. I bought 3 properties there. 2 years later, they were the triple. Business in the markets. Consumers buy when prices rise, Robert observed. Investors buy when prices fall. Investor mentality: stock market falls, equal opportunity to buy. Real estate falls, equal opportunity to buy. Everyone sells, equal time to buy or wait. Warren Buffett: be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful. It is the simplest and most violated rule of investing. Look in the right places. Most are looking for investments where everyone else is looking, Robert explained. The best opportunities are where no one is looking. Non-obvious places to look: notices of bankruptcy, businesses in forced sale, divorces, properties that need to be sold fast, corporate moves, executives selling fast, legal sections of newspapers, foreclosures, auctions. My best deal came from a 3-line divorce notice, he remembered. I bought a house of $200,000 for $70,000 because they needed to sell in a week. Buy in bulk. The rich buy in bulk, Robert taught. The poor buy at retail. Examples: instead of 1 stock, buy 1,000. Instead of a house, buy the building. Instead of a product, buy the box. Form buying groups to get discounts. I gathered 10 friends to buy a building, he shared. Each one put up $10,000. The seller gave 20% discount for the cash purchase. We earned 20% instantly. Learn from history. Markets are cyclical, Robert taught. What happened before will happen again. Historical patterns that I studied. Assets, roots go up and down every 7 to 10 years. Stock markets correct every 3 to 5 years. Investment fads last 5 to 7 years. Panic creates opportunities every decade. He studies the crash of 1929, 1987, 2000, 2008. He suggested the same patterns, the same emotions, the same opportunities for those who are prepared. Action versus inaction. Knowledge is potential power, Robert concluded. Action is real power. His final challenge: choose an action from everything you have learned. Do it in the next 48 hours. Don't expect to be 100% ready. Learn by doing, not studying. Most will die with their dreams intact because they never took the first step, he warned. Don't be part of the majority. Epilogue: education. College for $7,000. To illustrate the power of these applied lessons, Robert shared a final story about a friend who needed $400,000 for his 4 children's college education. I don't have $400,000, the desperate friend said. I barely have $7,000 saved. Perfect, Robert replied. It's all you need.
The friend was skeptical, but desperate enough to listen. Phoenix, 1991. The real estate market was devastated. Houses were sold for pennies on the dollar. Robert and his friend found a 3-bedroom home for $65,000. The owner owed $72,000. It was in foreclosure and happy that someone would take on the loan. They negotiated. Assumption of the $72,000 loan. Seller pays $7,000 to break free. Indeed, free house with $7,000 down. The friend used the $7,000 for minor repairs. He rented the house for $1,000 a month.
After all the expenses, I was making $150 a month. Only $150? The friend complained. I need $400,000. No, $150 a month. Patience, Robert said. This is just the beginning. 2 years later, Phoenix began to recover. The house was worth $95,000. Using equity as a down payment, they bought 2 more homes with the same strategy. 3 years later, they had 5 properties. The market was hot. An investor from California offered to buy the entire portfolio for $50,000, but instead of selling and paying huge taxes, they made a 131 trade. They bought a 12-unit apartment building in Austin, Texas for $200,000. Cash flow, $3,000 a month after expenses. In 5 years, Robert calculated, you transformed $7,000 into an asset of $200,000, generating $3,000 monthly. By the time your first child goes to college, you'll have the $400,000 and more. The friend was speechless, not because of the numbers, but because of the simplicity. He didn't need genius, just applied knowledge in action. That is the difference, Robert concluded, between those who know and those who do, between education and application, between dreaming of wealth and creating it. The power of choice. Sitting in his office after achieving financial freedom, Robert reflected on the journey. Thousands of people had read his teachings, attended his seminars, learned the principles, but only a small percentage had taken action. Why, he constantly wondered. The answer always came back to the same thing: choice. We are all born with the same potential, he wrote in his diary. The difference between rich and poor is not intelligence, education, or luck. It is choice. Every day we choose our financial destiny. He remembered his poor father, a brilliant man who chose security over freedom, conformism over risk, comfort over growth. He was no less intelligent than Rich Dad, he just chose differently. And that is the tragedy and the hope. Continued writing. Tragedy because most choose to stay where they are. Hope because at any moment anyone can choose to change. Rich Dad's lessons weren't complicated. The rich don't work for money. Understand the difference between assets and liabilities. Take care of your own business. Use corporations to protect and grow wealth. The rich invent money. Work to learn, not for money. Simple, but not easy, because it required something more difficult than intelligence or education. It required courage. The courage to question the status quo. The courage to think differently. The courage to act when others are paralyzed. The courage to fail and get up. The courage to be criticized by family and friends. The courage to go against the grain. Robert thought of all the students he had ever met. Those who succeeded were not the smartest. They were the ones who acted despite fear. Those who persisted despite failure. Those who learned rather than complained. Your life is the sum of your choices, he concluded. Choose to educate yourself financially. Choose to acquire assets. Choose to surround yourself with winners. Choose to act despite fear. Choose freedom over safety. Because in the end, it's not about money. It never was. It's about the life that money allows you to live. It's about the time you buy. It's about the choices you create. It's about the person you become in the process. My poor father died with regrets. My rich dad died with satisfaction. Both had the same opportunity. The difference was the choice. What will be your choice? With that question echoing, Robert closed his diary. Outside, the sun was setting over his many properties, businesses, and investments, but more importantly, it was about a life lived on its own terms. Financial education had not been the destination, it had been the vehicle to something much more valuable: freedom. And that freedom was available to anyone willing to choose it, learn it, and most importantly, live it. Because in the end, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is not just the story of 2 men with different philosophies about money. It is the story of each person facing the same fundamental decision. Will you live life on the terms of others, or will you create your own terms? Will you follow the beaten path, or forge your own path? Will you work your whole life for money, or will you learn how to make money work for you? The choice, as always, is yours. And with that choice comes responsibility, but also opportunity. The opportunity to not only change your financial life, but to transform your entire life.
Because when you understand money, when you master its rules, when you make it work for you instead of working for it, you don't just gain financial freedom, you gain something much more valuable. You earn your life back. And that, in the end, is Rich Dad's true gift. Not the formula to make millions, but the key to unlocking the potential that was always within you. The financial genius we all possess, waiting to be awakened, waiting for us to make that first crucial choice, to choose to be free. The rest, as Robert discovered, is simply a matter of education, application, and persistence. The path is clear, the tools are available, the knowledge has been shared. The only question that remains is, are you ready to start your own journey to financial freedom? The Rich Dad would be proud to know that his legacy continues, not in the words written in these pages, but in the actions of those brave enough to apply them. Because in the end, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is not what he taught, it's what you do with what he taught. Your turn to choose, your turn to act, your turn to be free. End of the audiobook Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a production that honors the teachings of Robert Kiyosaki and his mentor, Rich Dad, whose wisdom continues to transform lives decades after it was first shared. May these lessons not only inform your mind, but transform your life. Not only understand the difference between assets and liabilities, but act on that knowledge. And not only dream of financial freedom, but build it, one asset at a time. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Thank you so much, friend, for listening. Leave your ideas in the comments section so our community can grow by learning together. That's all for now. Until the next audiobook,